Hey everyone, this is the 8th month of the TQS Block of the Month for 2014, A to Z for You and Me, designed by Janet Stone. I'm Julie Cephalou, and I have 3 blocks that I want to show you for this month. They're the letters U, W, and X. So let's start with the first block. It's the Union Star block, and I want to take a good close look at it. So let's look down here. And I've got the block kind of laid out here, and I want to focus first on this center unit. This is a square and a square and a square. So what we'll be doing is sewing some triangles to a square. And I've, again, when I sew this, I sew it in this way so I can really see what's going on with my square. I want this to be my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when I sew it in this way, I really can't see what's happening on the bottom. So I prefer to sew it through like this. And let me go ahead and press these real quick out to the sides. And then we're gonna trim this down. And the measurement that you're trimming this square and a square is going to be 3 5/16 of an inch. And again, that's one of those funky numbers that we don't like to see, but it's really just shy of 3 3/8 of an inch. So right here I've got my my 3 1/4, here's 3 1/8, and it's going to be just in between those two. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my diagonal line of the ruler and place it on the seam right here. And then I'm going to make sure that the 1/4 inch line of my ruler is hitting the point right here. So it should look like that. And before I cut this, I'm just going to come on over here and just see where the other end is going to line up, and I want to make sure it's just shy of that 3 3/8 over here. So I'm good to go, and I can trim this side, and I'm going to turn this around, and now I'm going to place this so it's just shy of the 3 3/8 right there. And I've got my 1/4 inch right here on my point. And I can go ahead and trim this side. And then we'll do the same thing on the other two sides. 1/4 inch is here, diagonal line is here on my seam, and trim and trim. And then this unit is going to be used for the center of the next part. So once that's trimmed up, we're going to take it and add some more triangles to each side. Let me just show you what that looks like on the back. And now this is oversized and needs to get trimmed to a 4 1/2 inch square. So again, on this one, I'm going to take this diagonal line and I want it to run right here, corner to corner through these points. And I want my 1/4 inch mark on my ruler to be right here on this outside point. So once I've got everything lined up here and here, I'm also going to double check over here. This is my 4 1/2 inch line, and it's a 1/4 inch beyond the point here, so we're all good. I'm going to trim this side, and I can actually trim the top here for me, because that is also a 1/4 inch beyond the point there. I'm going to go ahead and trim this side also. And now I'll turn this around and line up these cut edges with the 4 1/2 inch line on my ruler, like that. I can still see that I've got my points a 1/4 inch beyond the raw edge, and I can trim these two sides. And then I've got my square and a square and a square unit for the center of my Union Square block. Then The other pieces to this are going to be some half square triangle units that need to be trimmed down to 1.5 inches. They've been oversized, and you'll trim them down. And you're going to be making some flying geese units that look like this. You'll make 4 of these, and the method for making these is similar to what we did back in month 1. You're going to start with a large square. I believe this is a 3.5 inch square. Double check that. Yep. So we've got a 3.5 inch square, and then you'll have 4 smaller squares. These are gold, and these are 2 inch squares. You'll draw a line through your squares and place them on opposite corners of the larger square, and then you'll stitch on each side of that drawn line. And we're going to cut it apart right on the drawn line. And then you're going to press these little triangles here up like that. And then you're going to take your other square and place it in the corner so that these raw edges line up down here and here. And you'll stitch 1/4 inch on each side of that drawn line, which I have done right here. And now we need to cut this apart. We're going to cut it apart on that line. And I'm going to go ahead and press this, but I've got 2 flying geese units here, and we'll make 2 more from the other half. Let me go over here to the ironing board. I'm just pressing this out to the corners. And here's my flying geese unit. Now this is still oversized, and I need to trim it down. And I've got my block lock ruler for a 1 inch by 2 inch finished flying geese unit. And again, this has got those grooves on the back side of it, and they just push right up into the seam allowance. Makes it really easy to trim these up. I'm going to trim this side and this side, and then we'll turn it around and trim the other 2 sides. Love it. It's nice and fast and efficient. My favorite words in quilting, fast and efficient. Okay, so we're going to take our flying geese unit and arrange it like so around our center square. So I've got a flying geese unit in the middle, surrounded by 2 half square triangle units here. And I've sewn these together, and let me show you how I pressed these. I pressed this seam open here and here. And again, you've got a little match point right here where the 2 points want to match up. So be real careful when you're pinning this and then stitching it. And once you've got the sides sewn on, you're going to sew together a top and bottom row that look like this. You've got the plain corner squares here on each end, and then this will get sewn to the top and the bottom, and you will have a completed union square block. Before we move on, and for the record, this block is actually called the Union Square block, and I've been calling it Union Star half the time, but it is the Union Square block. Next up, we have the W block. This is the windmill block, and I love this block. Janet has given me a new technique to make this that I hadn't seen before, and you're gonna love it. So this is what the windmill block looks like. And to make these little units right here, you're going to you'll cut some large yellow squares, and you've got some light blue and dark blue squares that you've sewn into pairs. And when you place this pair of squares onto the larger block, make sure the larger block is on point, and that you've got the dark blue square on top, and you're just going to move it over until the raw edges line up with the corners of this 2 patch right here. So it should look like that. And then you're going to sew your 1/4 inch seam allowance, which I have done right here. So here I've got it sewn, and Then we're just going to trim away this excess yellow fabric. Let me do that here. And once that's trimmed away, we're going to press it. So come on over to the ironing board and we're going to press towards the yellow. And then we're going to square this up to a 2.5 inch square. And let me show you how you're going to do that. So I'm going to put the 45-degree line of my ruler right on this seam line in between my blue squares. And I want to make sure that the 1.25 inch lines are right here at that center point. So the tip of the ruler is going to be right here at the edge of my two blue squares. And I'm going to trim on this side and this side. And I want you to be aware that this is now going to be bias edges right here. They're exposed bias edges that you're going to want to just be really careful about when you're pressing it and when you're stitching it. So now I'm going to place the 2.5 inch line on my raw edges here and here, and I'm going to cut the yellow fabric away. And there is my little unit for my pinwheel block. You'll be making 4 of these. And when you sew these together, just be careful of these bias edges here. And then pay attention to where these all come together here in the middle. I'm going to show you the wrong side. Again, we've done this little swirly thing here for the pressing to keep this nice and flat. And it'll look like a little pinwheel block on the wrong side. The other thing I want to mention is that you're going to be sewing some triangles on to the outside edges of the block. And then at this point, you want to square the block up to 6.5 inches. I would recommend cutting the squares for these triangles about 1/4 inch larger. I believe you want to cut them 4.25 inches, and it just gives you more wiggle room to trim this up. Right now my block is just at 6.5 inches. I don't have much room to trim. So if you cut these a little bit bigger, it'll allow you to be able to trim this up some more. And then you'll add the background square and the letter W for windmill. And that's your windmill block. The last block for this month is X for X marks the spot. Maybe we'll find some buried treasures under this block. Let's take a look at it. So we've got the center here that's made up of 4 of these units that look like this. This is a background block with some 1-inch squares sewn to 2 corners with the stitch and flip method. And I just want to point out that when you do this and you press towards the corner here, flip it over and see if you've got any of that blue fabric hanging beyond this base square. If it is, you can go ahead and trim that. I have a little bit right here that I could trim. It's not much, but I like to get it nice and perfectly square. So I'm just going to trim a little bit here and here. And then I can go ahead and trim that, that excess seam allowance away. Do that. And if you want to, what I did is I actually pressed 2 of these out towards the corner, 2 of these units out towards the corner, and then 2 of them I pressed so that it was going in towards the background fabric. And I did that just so I could get my opposing seams right here to nest together. Let me show you what that looks like on the back side. I've pressed my seams open, both across and up and down. and these seams right here are nesting, so it makes it nice and easy to match those points up really well. Once you've got this sewn together, we're going to be appliquing some X strips across here. And I think in an effort to conserve fabric and fusible paper, Janet might have had you cut everything the same size. So in other words, the fusible paper is cut the same size as the fabric. I like to cut my fabric a little bit bigger so I'm not getting that fusible on my iron or on my pressing surface. And then I can cut this down to, this is going to be a 3/4 inch wide strip. Once you've got your strip trimmed down to 3/4 inch, you're going to place it on your X block. So we're going to place it right here down the middle. And when you do this, you're going to want to flip your block over to make sure, let me do this here, that the corners of your square are right in the middle of your strip. So I've done that here and here. It looks like that. And I'm going to flip it back over again. Once you've got it fused in place on both sides, then you're going to trim around to make this a 5-inch square. Then you're going to be adding some rectangles to each side, and then you've got some corner squares here that you'll add to these rectangles, top and bottom. And once you've got these sewn on, you'll be trimming this block up again. So these are oversized, and there's another opportunity to trim this down. We'll be trimming it to a 6.5 inch square when we're all done. And there you have X marks the spot. And that's all of our blocks for month 8, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with and show them in the gallery so we can all take a peek. See you next time.